It was meant to be a day of celebration. Trump stepped into a meeting with Zelensky, brimming with confidence and expecting to secure a highly favorable deal with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Zelensky was prepared to lock in a crucial US security guarantee, but what should have been a moment of mutual victory unraveled into a fiery confrontation. Tensions erupted, heated words were exchanged, and in a dramatic twist, Trump personally ordered Zelensky out of the Oval Office. And it all started with Zelensky's terrifying message to Trump. Zelensky's message. The meeting between the two leaders began on a deceptively light note until Vice President J.D. Vance, with a measured tone, informed President Zelensky that under President Trump, the United States was engaging in diplomacy with Russia. The word diplomacy didn't sit right with Zelensky. He interrupted Vance, firmly reminding him that diplomacy with Putin was impossible. He recalled how, back in 2019, he, President Macron, and former German Chancellor Merkel had signed a ceasefire with Putin. At the time, everyone assured him that Russia would respect the agreement, but that never happened. Instead, Putin continued his assault on Ukraine, claiming the lives of innocent civilians. Zelensky went on, recalling how Ukraine had released captured Russian prisoners as part of the deal, yet Putin never returned the Ukrainians he had taken. His frustration was evident as he turned back to Vance.
But after that, he broke this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, J.D., you are speaking about? What do you mean?
At that moment, J.D. Vance's tone shifted slightly. He became more defensive and responded by saying this.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
But this wasn't the breaking point, at least not yet. As J.D. Vance pressed on with pointed questions, the tension in the room thickened. Zelensky, growing visibly frustrated, warned that the US's reluctance to support Ukraine against Russia wouldn't go unnoticed. It could come back to haunt them. You will feel it, he cautioned. And that was the moment Donald Trump snapped.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
What followed was a complete breakdown of the discussion. Tensions escalated as Trump repeatedly emphasized that Zelensky was not in a strong negotiating position. Each time Zelensky attempted to make his case, he was interrupted. Trump pressed further. "You don't have the cards," he stated firmly. Zelensky, undeterred, responded, "I'm not playing cards," but Trump was quick to counter. "You are. You're gambling with World War III and the lives of millions of people." When Zelensky tried to speak again, Trump cut him off, telling him he'd already talked enough and hammering home the point that Ukraine wasn't winning the war. But at the same time, Trump made it clear that Ukraine still had a fighting chance, thanks to American support. Zelensky, staying composed but firm, acknowledged the gravity of the situation, reminding everyone that Ukraine had been standing strong and fighting on its own since the war began. He also clarified that while he had expressed gratitude, he had done so privately within cabinet meetings rather than in public. But the moment Zelensky said Ukraine had been fighting alone, something about that seemed to strike a nerve with Trump. He immediately fired back with a response that was classic Trump.
You haven't been
In this
alone.
cabinet,
You haven't been
not only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said,
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
Trump took it a step further, making it clear that doing business under these conditions wouldn't be easy. Zelensky attempted to de-escalate, thanking the American people and government, but Trump wasn't letting it go. He kept hammering home the point: Ukraine didn't stand a chance without US support. The tension escalated again when Trump pointed out that Ukraine was running low on soldiers and pushed for a ceasefire, arguing it would be the smartest move to stop the bloodshed and preserve what remained of Ukraine's forces. Zelensky, while agreeing that Ukraine wanted peace, stressed that any ceasefire had to come with solid guarantees to ensure Russia wouldn't just regroup and strike again. But Trump wasn't interested in a drawn-out negotiation. He insisted a ceasefire could happen much faster than a full peace deal and seemed irritated that Zelensky wasn't immediately on board. Then came the comparison, one Trump has made before. He contrasted Obama's support for Ukraine, which he described as merely sending basic supplies like blankets and sheets, with his own, boasting that he had sent javelins, the advanced weapons Ukraine used to take out about Russian tanks, and once again, Trump circled back to the idea that Ukraine should be more grateful. From his perspective, Ukraine didn't have much leverage without US backing, and he made sure everyone in the room knew it. As the exchange intensified, a reporter interjected with a pressing question: what if Putin doesn't stop? What if, like last time, he ignores the ceasefire? Trump didn't hesitate. Here was his response.
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
After addressing the reporter's question, Trump shifted his focus back to Zelensky.
The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards.
The meeting concluded with Trump effectively asking Zelensky to leave, a moment that sent ripples across the globe. Many European leaders reacted with disappointment, viewing it as a blatant show of disrespect toward a key US ally, especially in front of Russia, the very nation that has devastated Ukraine and claimed countless lives. As footage of the exchange spread, speculation grew. Was this confrontation merely an unscripted clash, or was the entire meeting designed to humiliate Zelensky on the world stage? Lately, Trump has been deflecting questions about Putin, at times even speaking of him with a level of respect rarely seen from a US president. Meanwhile, Zelensky refuses to take any chances. Having witnessed firsthand what Putin is capable of, he seeks concrete support from Trump, but so far, all he has received are reassurances, promises that Putin will honor an agreement simply because he respects Trump more than Biden. But when in history has a US president placed such faith in Putin's word, especially after Putin has demonstrated that he doesn't keep to his words? Could it be that Putin holds some form of leverage over Trump that's pushing him to align more closely with the Russian leader? Trump's stance on the Ukraine war. Just 2 days before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Trump openly praised Vladimir Putin's moves, calling them savvy and genius. Watching the news as Putin declared a large section of Ukraine independent, Trump couldn't help but admire the maneuver, describing it as a bold display of power. The problem is not that Putin is smart, which of course he's smart. The problem is that our leaders are dumb, and so far allowed him to get away with this travesty and assault on humanity. He didn't stop there. Trump went on to claim that Putin is playing former President Joe Biden like a drum, and it's not a pretty thing to watch. To Trump, Putin's move wasn't just a calculated political play, it was a demonstration of strong peacekeeping, so much so that he even suggested a similar approach could be used to secure the US southern border. But Trump's stance on Ukraine can't be examined in isolation. It's part of a broader pattern in his relationship with Russia. His admiration for Putin has been evident for years, dating back to his 2016 campaign, when he suggested the Russian leader might become his new best friend. He once claimed that Putin has eaten Obama's lunch and consistently framed Putin as a formidable strategist, while criticizing US leaders as weak in comparison. His ties to Russia became the subject of intense scrutiny during the 2016 election, leading to the Mueller investigation, a probe Trump repeatedly slammed as a witch hunt, even in the recent meeting with Zelensky.
I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt.
The final report uncovered multiple contacts between Trump's campaign and Russian operatives, including efforts to solicit assistance. While it ultimately found insufficient evidence to prove coordination, it also noted significant obstacles, including missing evidence and false testimony. Despite this, Trump has insisted that the report cleared him, an assertion that Robert Mueller himself refuted. If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so, Mueller clarified, adding that obstruction and misleading testimony hindered the investigation. Among those caught in the crossfire was longtime Trump ally Roger Stone, convicted of obstructing the probe, only to be pardoned by Trump before serving time. When Trump was asked a direct question if he wants Ukraine to win the war against Russia, he sidestepped the question and said he wanted the war to stop. He focused on the war's human toll by saying that people were being killed by the millions, a number that hasn't been confirmed by any country or international organization. He went even further, claiming that if elected, he would negotiate a deal before even taking office, warning that the United States was playing with World War III. His advisors had already floated the idea of a so-called peace deal, one that Ukraine would be forced to accept before Trump's potential inauguration this January. Yes, the January from 2 months ago. Trump dismissed Russia's invasion as a war that's dying to be settled and insisted, "I will get it settled before I even become president." And yet, here we are, watching one of the world's most powerful leaders try to strong-arm a war-torn nation, belittling its leader for refusing to accept accept his terms. Even before the meeting meant to bring progress, he mocked his choice of clothing, as if fashion mattered more than the fate of a country on the brink.
Yes, I had ready clothes. How are you? Pretty sure.
He's all dressed up today.
It's hardly surprising that Trump isn't giving Ukraine's security top priority. In the past, he has been explicit about his reluctance to offer strong security guarantees, saying he wouldn't go beyond very much. Instead, he believes Europe should take the lead in supporting Ukraine, rather than the US playing the role of primary defender. Trump has also made it clear that he sees NATO as part of the problem rather than the solution when it comes to Ukraine. When asked about Ukraine joining the alliance, he dismissed the idea outright, saying, "NATO, you can forget about it. I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started." This statement aligns with his long-standing criticisms of NATO, an organization he has repeatedly called obsolete and accused of taking advantage of the US. His viewpoint suggests that, under his leadership, Ukraine wouldn't have much hope of securing NATO membership, nor could it count on unwavering US support. Instead, he would expect European nations to bear the responsibility, something he has pushed for throughout his political career. Whatever Trump's views may be, one thing is certain: the outcome of that meeting, whether it went as planned or not, carries significant consequences. While the impact on the US's image is undeniable, it's Ukraine that stands to feel the effects most deeply. Fallout from the meeting. After the meeting ended, Russian officials wasted no time weighing in, seizing the moment as a propaganda victory. They eagerly labeled the tense exchange between Zelensky and Trump a historic moment, with some even calling it a livid reprimand from the Oval Office. Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova took it even further, mocking the situation by claiming that Trump had shown restraint by not physically assaulting Zelensky during their shouting match at the White House. "I think Zelensky's biggest lie of all his lies was his assertion in the White House that the Kiev regime in 2022 was alone, without support," she wrote on Telegram. She went on to say, "How Trump and Vance held back from hitting that scumbag is a miracle of restraint." Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now deputy head of Russia's Security Council, joined in, launching a crude attack on Zelensky. He called him an insolent pig who had received a proper slapdown in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, Kirill Dmitriev, head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, described the fiery confrontation between Trump and Zelensky as historic. Dmitriev, who was one of Moscow's negotiators in the Russian-American talks in Saudi Arabia back in February 2022, made it clear that Russia saw the spectacle as a turning point. To the Kremlin, this public rift wasn't just a moment of tension, it was a strategic win. The sight of a divided US and Ukraine fed right into their narrative, highlighting fractures in the alliance, and they wasted no time capitalizing on it. The fact that Russia is openly gloating over the incident only reinforces the concern that the meeting didn't just strain diplomatic ties, it handed Moscow an easy PR victory and made an already delicate situation even more precarious. Several Republicans, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, praised Trump's handling of the meeting, describing it as a forceful defense of American interests. GOP Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, a staunch Trump ally, called into Fox News to commend the president, telling him the exchange with Zelensky was possibly the best television he had ever seen. "I think Moscow is more afraid than ever," Graham added, suggesting that the meeting sent a strong message to Russia. Even outside of Washington, support for Trump's performance surfaced. Special government employee Elon Musk reacted on X, where he's the owner, by simply posting "all dressed up" with a crying, laughing emoji. But not everyone saw it that way. Ever since Russia stormed into Ukraine in February 2022, Democrats have remained steadfast in their support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Under former President Joe Biden, the US pledged unwavering assistance, channeling billions into military and economic aid. In 2022 alone, Congress approved a staggering $112 billion in support, and by April 2024, another $95 billion was allocated, not just for Ukraine, but also for Israel and Taiwan. So when Trump publicly berated President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office, it was no surprise that Democrats quickly rallied behind the Ukrainian leader, slamming the encounter as both humiliating and reckless. The backlash was swift and loud. California Senator Adam Schiff led the charge with a scathing rebuke. "A hero and a coward are meeting in the Oval Office today, and when the meeting is over, the hero will return home to Ukraine." His words underscored the contrast between Zelensky, a wartime leader fighting for his country, and Trump, whose handling of the meeting drew widespread condemnation. Even former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who served in Trump's first administration but has since become one of his most vocal critics, didn't hold back. He tore into both Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, calling their behavior during the meeting disgraceful and warning that it only played into Moscow's hands. Trump and Vance have openly declared themselves on Russia's side in the Russo-Ukraine war, Bolton wrote on X. X. This is a catastrophic mistake for America's national security. And let's be clear, Trump and Vance now personally own that policy. It is not the view of a majority of Americans, whether Republican, Democrat, or independent. H.R. McMaster, another former national security advisor from Trump's first administration, was equally baffled. It's impossible to understand why Trump and Vance seem determined to pressure President Zelensky while coddling Putin, the man responsible for this brutal war in Ukraine, he said. Democratic lawmakers also wasted no time condemning the exchange. Senator Jan Shaheen of New Hampshire, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called the outrageous display from Trump and Vance both disgraceful and downright un-American. She accused Trump of siding with a murderous thug, Putin, over our democratic ally, Ukraine. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland echoed the outrage, calling the entire situation beyond disgraceful. His frustration reflected the growing concern over how Ukraine's leader had been treated. Meanwhile, Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota called on her Republican colleagues to take a stand. Once, we fought tyrants. Today, Trump and Vance are bending America's knee, she warned, urging fellow lawmakers to speak out in the name of patriotism. Chris Murphy, the Democratic senator from Connecticut, summed up the moment in blunt terms: an utter embarrassment for America. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego didn't mince words either, simply calling it a disgrace. Beyond just political outrage, many saw this as a defining test of America's commitment to its allies, one that, in their eyes, Trump and Vance had failed spectacularly. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, accused Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance of doing Putin's dirty work. He wasn't alone in this sentiment. Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democratic senator from Rhode Island, took it a step further, likening Trump and Vance to ventriloquist dummies for Putin. Meanwhile, Dick Durbin, the Illinois senator, didn't hold back, insisting that the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky deserve an apology. He went on to accuse Trump and Vance of putting on a performance that would make Putin blush, suggesting that their behavior was a gift to the Kremlin. Chris Coons, a Democratic senator from Delaware, also expressed his dismay, writing, "We owe him our thanks for leading a nation fighting on the front lines of democracy, not the public berating he received at the White House." His frustration was shared by many, as the meeting seemed to undermine US support for Ukraine at a critical moment. The biggest consequence of this fallout isn't just how the US looks to the world, it's how the meeting has weakened Ukraine's position globally, disrupted Western alliances, and given Russia an edge. One of the most pressing concerns is whether the US will continue supplying military aid to Ukraine. For years, American weapons, ranging from Javelin missiles to artillery shells, have been essential for Ukrainian forces as they fight a larger, better-equipped Russian military. However, Trump's lack of support for Zelensky during the meeting, along with his repeated calls for Europe to take on more responsibility, has fueled fears that US aid could be reduced or cut off entirely. Michael Kaufman, a military analyst at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, estimates that Ukraine has enough weapons to sustain its current fight until summer, but without continued US support, Kyiv would face severe ammunition shortages and lose access to some of its most advanced weaponry. And this isn't just about bullets. Ukraine relies on American air defense systems, drones, and intelligence sharing to stay in the fight. To put the scale of US aid into perspective, since Russia first invaded Ukraine in 2014, the US has provided roughly $69.2 billion in military support. That number skyrocketed after the full-scale invasion in February 2022, with an additional $65.9 billion sent to bolster Ukraine's defenses. Using the Emergency Presidential Drawdown Authority, the US has dipped into Pentagon stockpiles 55 times since August 2021, delivering around $27.7 billion worth of equipment. This aid has included advanced air defense systems such as Patriot batteries, NASAMS, and Hawk systems, along with thousands of anti-aircraft missiles, including Stingers and AIMs. The US has also supplied Ukraine with over 40 HIMARS systems, hundreds of howitzers, and millions of artillery rounds. Additionally, Ukraine has received heavy armor, including Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles, as well as anti-armor systems, small arms, maritime defenses, and surveillance technology. This extensive support has kept Ukraine in the fight, but that may soon change. There are growing rumors within the Trump administration that some of the aid shipments approved under former President Joe Biden may never reach Ukraine. Biden's last-minute push to secure billions in additional aid before leaving office was seen as an attempt to lock in US support, but now those commitments are on shaky ground. Following the tense Oval Office meeting, President Zelensky told Fox News that without American support, Ukraine would struggle to defend itself against Russian forces. However, he remained hopeful that relations with Washington could be repaired, expressing a desire for Trump to take a stronger stance in support of Ukraine. At the same time, there's growing growing debate in Ukraine about Zelensky's leadership. Once a unifying figure in the war, he is now facing criticism, even from his allies. His refusal to make concessions or soften his hardline stance on total victory has put him at odds with key international partners, including Trump. Some believe that both Trump and Putin would prefer to see someone more flexible leading Ukraine, raising questions about whether Zelensky can maintain his grip on power. Amid uncertainty over US support, European leaders are stepping up, concerned about Trump's stance on Ukraine and his apparent willingness to appease Putin. Several European countries are moving to strengthen their commitments. Representatives from more than a dozen nations are set to meet in London to discuss new measures for securing a lasting peace in Ukraine. A key focus of this meeting will be enhancing European defense cooperation as doubts grow over whether the US will continue standing by NATO and its allies. French President Emmanuel Macron has even suggested reopening discussions on a European nuclear deterrent, following a request from Germany's incoming leader, Friedrich Merz. Merz has stressed the urgent need for Europe to reduce its reliance on the US for defense, reflecting a broader shift toward European self-sufficiency in military matters. Ultimately, Trump may soon realize that ending this war isn't as simple as striking a deal between two leaders. Russia has entrenched goals in Ukraine, and Kyiv isn't willing to surrender its sovereignty. Any meaningful negotiation would require painful compromises, something neither side has shown much willingness to accept. And that's a wrap. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out these ones on your screen. You might enjoy them too.